So if you're thinking before a game versus during a game versus after a game, same thing with your thoughts. There's things that are more productive as you prepare versus when you're in the middle of it. The goal is to do as little thinking and feeling as possible and just execute.
Welcome to the Foul Pole to Foul Pole podcast, brought to you by Black Diamond Softball and Fitness, presented by the Till Valhalla Project, where heroes live on forever.
Born and raised Southern California, grew up playing softball. It's actually a funny story how I ended up playing softball is I had moved, born in Torrance, and we had lived there for a little bit, and then we moved out to Temecula area. And we had missed all when we moved in the school year and all that kind of stuff. I had missed the tryouts, and I had for baseball, t-ball, that kind of thing. I didn't know softball existed, actually. I was, 8 years old, had no idea it existed. I had only played t-ball in Little League up to that point. And I was very much a tomboy, played everything I could at recess. And my teacher's aide in my second grade year, her husband had a little local travel ball softball team. And she saw me playing and out on the basketball court, like throwing bows with the guys. She's like, I want you on my daughter's team. And so she linked me up. I went to tryouts and fell in love with the game. So, so softball, that's how I got into softball. But why I got into sports psychology was, and I share obviously a few of these stories in the book, but I knew I wanted to play in college. I was very passionate about that. I wanted to earn a scholarship. And those high school years for me, it was that transition into, for lack of a better term, professionalizing my sport, that I was no longer just doing it for fun,
right.
That I had an intent and I had something that I wanted to pursue. And so that really added a level of pressure and a dynamic to the game that I hadn't really had before up until that point. And so I was struggling in a couple ways, putting pressure on myself. And my parents thankfully were like, let's get you some help. So I worked with a sports psychologist at the time in my junior year, transitioned from my sophomore year into my junior year. It really just helped me get my head on straight. I was pretty decent at the mental game, but it really just helped me up the level so that I could deal with some of the shenanigans that I had to deal with, with a poor coach and some situations that happened to me in summer ball. But and then I went on to play in college, and my undergrad degree was kinesiology.
Mm-hmm.
So originally I was going to pursue coaching softball. Like I thought that was what I wanted to do. And then as I actually lived the D1 life as the athlete, I realized I don't actually want to do that as a job. It's amazing. But I mean, you're all over the place, the hours, the travel, like it was nuts. So I was like, I'm not sure I want to do that. And then ended up taking a sports psych class as part of my kinesiology degree. And having remembered the work I personally did with a sports psychology professional, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to study. I had always been intrigued by the mental game.
Mm-hmm.
I used to love I was a utility player primarily, but I was actually recruited as a catcher. And I think one of the things that made me a unique player was I was very good at managing the pitcher and getting them solid and helping my teammates be comfortable, confident, like getting them out of their head. And so some of the strategies I had kind of picked up, I was using as a catcher. And then when I took the class, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the thing. That's what I was doing. Or, wow, I really wish I would have had that last week, And so I went on to pursue my master's degree with mental health and sports psychology.
And for me, it just sounds like it all came about organically. And I talk about things happening organically. And those are the people like yourself that you get into it by not forcing something like, hey, I'm jumping into a career and then I'll make it whatever it is. It's like it kind of came over time, and I can feel that passion. When I read the book, I feel that passion in it. And it seems like in the book, as I'm reading it, it's like you are telling a story. Like I'm sitting in the audience and I am just listening to you tell me. And it's like I told you before we started recording this, it's like there's so many little things that jump out at me. And, I'm excited to hear your story and put your personal touch on this, because there's so many young athletes, male and female, not just the softball side, but that are going through a lot of stuff that they think that no one else goes through.
Yeah.
With the popularity of softball and how big it's grown, whether it's travel or AAU, whatever level
version.
that pay to play type stuff, are you seeing more and more people kind of opening up and wanting to learn more about mental performance and kind of how to understand it somewhat between the parents and the children?
Yeah, I think so. Generally speaking, the problem as I see it is like our youth, they're kind of, there's two simultaneous problems happening. Is one, we are the pay to play model, the professionalization, like a lot, I don't know, that sounds bad. A lot of people are pursuing sport as a pathway to college or something along those lines. And they're forgetting that sport is inherently a lived experience. It has its own value for just getting out there and competing and doing your best to be at your best, and having to fight, through tough games and situations, and losing and winning and the triumphs. And so like all of that has a tremendous value in just a lived experience and learning about yourself. And I think so many people this day and age have lost the perspective of what sport is for, what the actual intent is. Right. It's to help prepare you, build skills to be a good member of society, to give you tools to be successful as an adult. But then the other side of the house is our kids today, for no fault of their own, right, are just the way our society is now, but they are statistically less resilient than any other previous generation. Significantly more levels of anxiety, depression, suicidality, mental health issues. And now I don't personally study that, but everything that I've read is that it's a function of many things. It's not just one thing, but one of the things that is, at least from my understanding and my reading, is this: we're protecting kids from failure. And so kids think they have to be perfect, and this attempt to be perfect is creating its own anxieties and its own pressures and problems, where young people aren't pursuing anything for the joy of doing it anymore. It's focused on, I have to be a certain way, I need to be a certain way. And it's just, that makes me sad. It makes like, there's so much I want to help. I want to help these kids learn the value of hard work and failing and falling on your face. And so that when they get out into the real world, they realize, that's not actually that big a deal. People fail all the time. It's part of growing, developing. So that the first time they get a bad grade in college, they don't freak out and just have their world crushed, Right.
There's a lot that goes into that. And I'm trying to remember specifics here. I think you had mentioned it. I think in chapter 6 of the book, you were talking about like their inner circle or their network, whether it's friends or family, and kind of the group that they're around. And if you're around that type of environment where you're seeking perfection, and if we don't reach perfection, it's a failure. And I coach a lot using the word failure, because I'm tired of kids being afraid of that word, because if they don't fail, we don't learn. But it's like this just stigma of that word failure. And it's just like, it's almost like it's a roadblock, or like it's the end of the world if we fail. Can you kind of take off on that word failure? We're talking about perfection a little bit, and kind of with that inner circle with parents and friends and family.
Yeah. So I think, twofold. One, a lot of people, there's different types of failure, and unfortunately people treat them all the same. And if you look at the scale of failure, there's actually a lot of research on this in the business world and psychological safety and those type of things. But, there's one end of the spectrum, which is I failed because I didn't prepare. I was negligent. I just slacked off. Like I didn't do the things I needed to do. Right. That's not the same as pursuing excellence. I tried something new. I got out of my comfort zone. I was willing to try something difficult. and I fell on my face doing on it, or I tried a new way of doing it just to see, right? That's a very different level of failure. And so understanding on the level of on kind of a spectrum, it's absolutely appropriate to have standards of behavior and execution and things like that, right? I had to run many, many laps for pitchers not hitting the cutoff, or like not hitting a cutoff, or a pitcher not hitting the pitch out, right? Where I had to stand there and hold my glove out, and if they couldn't hit it, we all had to run. Like, there's elements of that matters, right? There has to be certain standards, but it was different of, at least for me growing up, I was never yelled at for trying to stretch, trying to go first to third on a ball in the outfield, right? Because that was pursuing excellence. I was going for that extra base. I was being aggressive. Whereas if I just stood there with a bat on my shoulder, taking pitches, struck out in 3 pitches, that's a different kind of failure, right? So I think one of the things that we can do in this chapter, and what I was hopefully doing, is teaching not all failures are created equal. And if you can understand what kind of failure you made, if it was a calculated risk, an opportunity, a challenge that you pushed yourself, you went beyond your current skill set, or you tried something brave, like, that's amazing. Do that. Those are not failures. Those are growth opportunities. Those are pushing yourself and challenging yourself to be better. Right. Now, if you failed because, again, you didn't do the work, you didn't do your homework, you didn't do the assignment, you didn't do your conditioning workouts the way you should have, and you showed up, huffing and puffing, like, that's different.
Right.
And so recognizing that not all failures created equal.
I think that's the biggest thing. I think you hit it in the very beginning when you were talking about there's different types of failure, but it all gets thrown underneath one umbrella, and it's just like, failure, we got to keep it away from us. No matter what, we have to keep all those in it. And I don't think that's a good thing. No. How did you land on the title Confident, Calm, and Clutch? Like, because I mean, when we're thinking about the mental toughness, I mean, those 3 words, it sums it up. So how did you just pick out those 3 and this is it? This is what.
Yeah, it was definitely a process. It started, it didn't start there. I literally had a notebook, and I was thinking through all of the, what are the core attributes that define mental toughness, or define, being able to perform under pressure when it matters. And I had this whole list of things of calm and cool and confident, and they weren't all C's. I don't know. I'm just thinking of the C, but, and I tried to pick out, for me, when I was playing, what was I, in the simplest terms, what were the bare minimum I needed to be successful? And so confident in my abilities was one. And that's definitely something I know that's the number one thing parents and athletes come to me for, is confidence issues, self-doubt, and not trusting their skills and their abilities. So I knew I wanted that to be a part of it. I was struggling between cool and calm, mixing those together. But I ultimately went with calm, because for me, it's a physiological state. Mm-hmm. Can I keep my body under control? But it's also a mental state. Am I frazzled? Am I hectic? Or am I just focused on one thing? Is it, so it encompasses a couple of things for me there. And then clutch, I don't know, I just always liked the word of being clutch under pressure. You think of the Michael Jordan last minute step left toss. It's oh, he's so clutch, right? He always makes their those people who just were always getting the hit, making the play, making that final shot, whatever it was, that was a word that kind of defined an attitude for me.
Yeah.
Being clutch, but also this idea of performing well under pressure, that you're not a practice player, right? That you can actually do it when it matters. And I think for obviously a lot of players, that's the goal. You don't want to just get a hit when nobody's on and the game doesn't matter. You want to be able to bottom of the 7th inning, tied score, bases loaded, tournament on the line. I want to be able to thrive in those moments too.
Yeah. And you talk a little bit later on in the book about self-talk. And I was thinking about the title and self-talk. And if we have our athletes talking about being confident and what that means to them, when we ask our athletes that,
Yeah.
and what does it feel, or what do you think about, or how is it when you think of the word calm? And then what is it when you think about clutch? So if we're doing that, going through our self-talk routine, those three words to me pop up for those athletes. And if they can use them in the right way, I think it kind of helps them grow
Yeah.
on the mental side of it and through confidence.
Yeah, yeah. And I think those individual words might mean a little bit different things to different people, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But for me, I was like, what do I really want to help athletes build? What do I want these teenagers to have walking away from my book? And I was like, all right, bare minimum, they feel confident, they feel calm mentally and emotionally, and they're clutch under pressure.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, there you go.
Definitely. Getting back into the self-talk with athletes, how hard is it, do you think it is for an athlete to open themselves up a little bit, and when it comes to that self-talk, making sure they're saying the right thing to themselves and not leading themselves down the wrong path to kind of get rid of their confidence, and do the opposite and kind of build their confidence up?
Yeah. As far as, yeah, I mean, it's a skill like anything else. It all starts from having self-awareness. Are you even aware of what you're saying to yourself? Like, that's the big thing.
Yeah.
And then the second part is, how's it working for you? Because to say that there's one thought that everybody should have just doesn't work that way. Each individual player is motivated differently. You have different experiences, you have different upbringing, you have different skill level. And so you could never give every athlete in the world, here's this one phrase you need to say in your head if you want to be confident. Right. And so teaching them that exploratory process of, you got to figure out what works for you. The research shows, and through experience, there's some principles that tend to work better, which is what I share in the book, this idea of being productive, possibility focused, and purposeful. Right. So ideally, whatever you're thinking it on purpose. Right? Typically, that's going to be more effective than just letting whatever pops into your head weave in there. I mean, you're human. That's going to happen. We can't control every thought that we have. But if you're trying to be intentional, right, purposeful, it's going to be a little more effective. And productive. A lot of people say positive. I've found that I hate that word. Because it's misused all the time. Oh, just be positive, just think positive. It's like, no. There's a time and a place where you really sucked. You were horrible at that thing, and you need to say, wow, that was awful. You stunk in that moment. You need to do it better. Right? That's not necessarily positive, but it's necessary, right? You have to acknowledge the reality of a situation. And so my day job, I work with the military. And so that was one of the things that really helped shift my view on this idea of thinking positive, is that's not always the best option. You need to be productive. The things you're thinking need to work to either help you build confidence, motivation, or focus. Right. But it might not always be happy. And so, yeah, right. And so thinking about, okay, productive, like is what I'm saying to myself right now helping me in this moment either be calm, feel confident, or feel clutch, or I feel like I can do what I'm doing under pressure. And then the last space is possibility focused, more focused on what you can do instead of versus what you're not capable of doing. And at least to your question of how open are athletes, I've actually, for the most part, people are usually pretty open about what's going on through their head. Thankfully, which is great. This newer generation of kids, they're more, I don't know what the right term, and more willing to talk about it, I guess would be the right thing. They're not worried about sharing what's going on in their head. I think they're probably less skilled at knowing how it's actually affecting them. But
that's a very good point.
Yeah.
I didn't look at it that way. That's a very good point. I like that. Write that down. It's funny. I'm glad you mentioned it like that. I want to go back to one point where the parents, it's like Mandy Baldoff, one of my friends, said, It used to be helicopter parents.
Mm.
Now it's lawnmower parents, where just mow everything down.
Yeah.
Nothing can affect their kid, and they want everything to be perfect. And they
Yeah.
can explain away so much. But what we're doing is, like you said, we're not allowing them to fail in moments where they can learn from that failure. We're just taking that possibility away from them and then explaining it away and saying, hey, no, it's this, this, or this. And we're not letting them go through the emotional process. We're not letting them go through their emotions. And you talk about that in the book. Kind of help me understand a little bit how, so I can help athletes as well, understanding their emotions, and it's okay to feel whatever emotion you feel because it's natural and it's organic.
Yeah. I think for me, the understanding that the emotional experience is information, right? Emotions are wonderful teachers. They tell you kind of what needs to happen next. So for example, let's say you had a terrible at bat with bases loaded and you feel frustrated or pissed off or angry at yourself.
Right.
All very informative information, because it's like, why am I angry at myself? Well, because I didn't do what I know I needed to do. Or there's a difference. I'm frustrated because I tried. I did the thing I needed to do. It still didn't work. Or I'm disappointed in myself because I let the team down. Interesting. Okay, so you really care about how you show up for your teammates and that kind of thing. So emotions are just information. They help you understand the impact of things. And for me, like tuning into that is important, and any emotion is fine. I would say, obviously, that doesn't mean you need to give it rein to control what you're doing. You don't need to act out of every emotion that you experience. Right. Which is part of the reason why the mindfulness piece in the book is so important. Experiencing what you're experiencing is important. If you're disappointed, if you're frustrated, if you're angry, if you're excited, if you're elated, if you're like you just don't want to be there that day, which okay, that's all right. That's information. What's going on today that makes that true? Why do you need to know that about yourself? Okay, well, maybe you learned, I don't know, you learned something about yourself that you're missing out. The reason you're blah is because maybe you're out of practice or a game when you'd rather be doing this other thing in your life that's in this moment more important to you. Right. Well, that's wonderful information. How you feel right now is great information to understand. How can I maybe make choices differently in the future? Do I need to reprioritize things in my life? And so I think helping athletes understand, first off, just tuning into what are you actually feeling and naming it to the best of their ability. And then asking, okay, why? Why am I feeling this? Where's that coming from for me? And then hopefully whatever that why is the learning point, right? Is the place to move forward. I'm feeling this because of, you know what? I didn't prepare. I didn't do the right things. Okay. Well, now that's going to create motivation for me. I don't like feeling this. I'm going to go work harder, prepare differently next time. Or, I'm trying to think what else. So, the idea that emotions can be informative is important. And I would say that there's certain emotions that are probably going to be more effective in different time frames. Right. So if you're thinking before a game versus during a game versus after a game, same thing with your thoughts. There's things that are more productive as you prepare versus when you're in the middle of it. The goal is to do as little thinking and feeling as possible and just execute. And then after the fact, you can process and think about what was going on and how do I feel because of that. But due to the nature of softball, it's not a constant game like something like hockey or soccer where there's there's innings, there's transitions between innings. There's, so you're not constantly playing. And so there's a lot of pauses. There's a lot of opportunities to feel and think. And so if you can really get a hold of that and tune into that as an athlete and say, okay, what am I thinking? What am I feeling right now? And how's that impacting me? If it's working, drive on, keep doing what you're doing. If you're starting to notice like, that's probably not going to be my best headspace to go up to bat or to go back out to the mound or go back out to second base. So it's really just, there's no such thing as bad emotion.
Yeah.
But understanding how it impacts you and your ability to perform whatever task you're in, whether it's out in the field, up at the plate, pitching, catching, whatever it is. So
I I picked up on it, and it's like trying now from this moment forward, trying to give my athletes that I work with and my own daughters. I do have three daughters. Give them the freedom to have the emotion that they have, and not
yeah,
try to say, well, you should be angry at this, or you should be mad, or you should be happy, or this or that. Allowing them to go through it naturally, and then be able to talk about it and try to figure out why they feel that way, so they can explain it, and I can ask the right questions for them. I
yeah,
think that's huge for parents, coaches,
yeah.
mentors, whoever. Asking the questions and allowing them to give us the feedback instead of forcing something out of them.
Yeah. And I think that's so important because you have to remember, as a parent, as a coach, you have a very different, you're not in their head, you have a different perspective. And it's not good or bad, you're just not them. And so, our experience of watching, for instance, an athlete, and they go out there, they perform, and whatever happens, and you see them react emotionally, whichever way they reacted, happy, mad, glad, sad, mad. Right. It's thinking through, like, in your brain, well, I would have reacted differently if I was that kid. So clearly they should react the way I react.
Right.
Nuh-uh. Now, there's an element of teaching there too, is that if there was an inappropriate response, if they got angry and threw their helmet down and slammed their bat across, like, okay, right, they are still allowed to be angry. There's nothing wrong with being angry, but maybe the way they acted is still inappropriate. So there's a difference too of separating the emotion from the behavior. The emotion is always acceptable, whatever they felt, because that's their lived experience. But yeah, obviously, if they did something inappropriate in their actions, that's different. But yeah, as an observer, it's going to be more beneficial to be like, okay, I can see that you're very angry right now after that at bat or after that play. What's going on? What makes you so angry right now? And trying to really make sure we're asking questions from the place of curiosity, not judgment. Because the minute somebody feels judged, they're going to put up their walls, they're going to be defensive, and now you're not going to have that really important conversation that you need to have to help discover why they are feeling the way they're feeling, so that you can help coach them into a more productive path or thinking pattern or something along those lines. So
That's that's huge. That's big information right there. Um, you Once someone feels like their back's against the wall, they put that front up, and it's hard to communicate with them, and you're probably going to get some reaction out of them that is, you can't really take anything from, because they're acting out of whether it's anger or whatever, just because they have to go on the defense. And
yeah,
it's tough as parents, because we see it, we know it's coming, but we may not have the tools
yeah,
to do it like we think we do. Like, I think I have all the answers sometimes, and I know exactly what to say to them, blah blah blah, but they have already tuned me out. And it's like, man,
yeah,
all right, well, I missed it. I read it completely wrong, and I
yeah,
didn't connect like I wanted to connect. So
yeah. And some of that too is just, there are times where, I mean, I can think about specifically times with my parents where they wanted to process the game and the car ride home, and I'm like, don't talk to me. I have no capacity to process this. I don't want to process this, and so remembering that they're still processing what they're feeling, and they might need some time to cool off, simmer down, right? That when you're angry and frustrated is usually not a good headspace to process. You're not a lot less open, right? So it's sometimes you just have to let it ride. And then when they're more calm or more, it's just kind of run its course, then you can come back to it and say, all right, hey, remember yesterday when this went down? What was going on? What's going on for you? Can you walk me through? I want to help you. It seemed like insert whatever behavior, but so understanding too that there's a time and a place to process it. Sometimes they really just need to, you got to let them work through it. Yeah. And then there's the whole thing. And I'm not pretending like I'm not a parent. I'm talking from the kid's perspective in my psychology training, but I'm not a parent. So I'm not going to pretend I can answer all those questions. I know it's hard. But remembering too, like, I think sometimes we forget, like, if you can take yourself back to when I was a teenager, it's like, oh yeah. Okay. Sometimes you just don't want to talk to your dad. Like, you're like, no. Like,
Right.
and I loved my dad. I still do. I have a wonderful relationship with my dad, but there's plenty of things that maybe as a girl, I don't want to talk with dad about.
I have 3 daughters. They're 15. They're 15, soon to be 13 and 9. And they're
Nice.
man, it's the full gamut. It really is, from the
Yeah.
emotions to what they're going through, the
Yeah.
whole just everything.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be there, and a lot of times I'm too much there. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
like I'm trying to be that perfect dad sometimes, and it's just like, oh man, yeah, I miss it. I miss the sign. I didn't get the signal. I didn't get the wristband. Something I messed something up. So,
Yeah.
but
You missed the bunt sign.
it's tough because, when I started this whole podcast thing, it was just because I wanted the information to be able to give to my daughters and let my daughters have this information.
Yeah.
But then early on, I thought, you know what? There's so many moms and dads and coaches and mentors and just people out there that can use the same information that I'm trying to gather. So I started the podcast a little over a year ago, and it's just taken off. I'm able to talk with people like you that and ask the questions that I have. And I know that's not the questions that other people would have probably, but they do want to hear this type of information.
Yeah.
And, going back to the book, it's like, man, this thing can stay in the car, it can stay at home, it can stay like wherever you're at, and just you don't have to read the whole thing in one shot. You don't have to. It's just grab it, open up a page, doesn't matter where you're at, and just start reading. And I guarantee you're going to set it down and you're going to think about it, and you're going to start implementing that the next day or hours later. In chapter 9, you talked about short-term goals, and I wanted to hit that before we were getting out of here.
Yeah.
The acronym SMART. I wrote it down. I've typed out a little thing for my kids, and I love it. Can you kind of explain it, the short-term goals and how you landed on the acronym SMART?
And well, first off, I don't want to take credit. I did not invent that acronym.
Right.
So that's very much out there. So I want to give, I didn't invent it. But I think one of the reasons why I chose to use it is I think it's one of the simplest ways to think through how do I make a goal really functional and actionable. Because for a lot of us and a lot of kids, just people, this isn't just a teenager issue, is like, they know what they want. Okay. There's this thing I want to go for. I want to lose weight. I want to get fit. I want to earn this much money. I want to get this job. And they understand what they want. But then figuring out the pathway of how to actually make that happen is much more difficult. And recognizing that it doesn't just happen by magic. Some people are very fortunate and luck into those types of things, but for the most part, it's people who are more likely to achieve their goals are people who are taking purposeful action towards those goals. And so for me, SMART is just a simple, easy way to get after that. So the S, as you can read in the book, it just means specific, right? So you need to make sure that the action step you're identifying is not vague, because our brain is designed to be lazy and conserve energy. And so if you give it wiggle room, it'll take it. So practice more. Well, what does that mean? Okay, I went outside and swung my bat for 10 extra minutes this week. I practiced more. It's like, well, okay. Not sure that's going to get you where you need to go. So getting specific, like I need to do 30, and this, it combines with measurable very well, but I need to hitting practice more each week. Okay. Well, what does more mean? Well, let's put some measurement to it, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, certain amount of extra swings that I'm going to take. All right. So getting concrete with what, because when you want to be able to tell, like, check a box. Yes, I did that. And the only really way to tell whether you've done it or not, if there's some sort of metric, I took 10 extra cuts off the tee. Yes, I did that. I took, 10 extra ground balls, whatever it is. I did this drill for 5 minutes type of thing. So it's just got to be concrete so that you know whether you've done it or not. And then
that builds confidence when they're specific and you can measure them and you're getting data out of it.
Yeah,
that builds confidence. It
does, and it becomes your. I talk very briefly in the book about a growth mindset, but you want to make sure it's hard to see growth, especially for athletes who are in it and working hard every day, because that lived experience, you don't see the incremental change.
Right.
But for instance, it's the good analogy is similar to like folks who are losing weight, right? And they see themselves every day, weigh themselves every day. It's hard to tell. But if I haven't seen that person in 3 months, I walk up to them like, holy cow, you're like half a person. Where'd that go? Where'd you go? Because I'm not seeing the everyday changes, right? So sometimes for kids or just anybody, I'll say this is just a teenage problem, but when we're in the thick of doing the work, we get lost in the details. And sometimes we forget to zoom back and be like, oh, look how far I've come. And so if you've got some measurable things to attain each time, it's like, oh, last week, weight training is an easy example. 3 months ago, I couldn't bench press the bar, and now I can. Now I'm bench pressing the bar plus 10 pounds on each side. It's like, oh, okay. But if you don't have that data, you don't have that, I guess, metric that you've been checking on, it's hard to tell. The A step for me, so this is the part where I depart a little bit from, I think for most people, A in the SMART step means achievable. And for me, that achievable and realistic were kind of too similar for me, because realistic for me means doable within the realm of possibility for me, right, given the resources and time that I have. So I think action focused is a little more helpful in the sense of when we're pursuing goals, often there's a lot of behaviors we need to stop doing.
That's a good point.
And so it's like, okay, well, don't do that. Well, our brain doesn't have a picture of don't in our head. I think I use the example in the book. Don't think about a pink elephant. Everybody watching and listening right now is thinking about a pink elephant because there's no picture for don't. Our brain uses images and pictures to process information. And so if I know that I don't want to think about a pink elephant, what I should do and what's the thing I need to do instead. So, don't watch TV till midnight. Don't watch Netflix till midnight so that I can get like, okay, but what do I do instead? Go to bed at 10:30 or turn off your phone, put your phone in another room, whatever. Right. So it's what's the replacement behavior or what's the thing you want to do instead of the thing you want to avoid doing.
Yeah, that is huge. And to take that a little bit further for these athletes, if you have that goal of wanting to not do something anymore, I don't want to drop my hands, I don't want to step out, I don't want to do this, you've got to replace what you don't want to do with something that you do want to do. So you have to fill that gap in.
Yeah. And that's important. Like, I mean, if you think about walking up to play, okay, don't strike out. But again, our brain is not interpreting don't. All you're thinking is strike out, strike out, strike out. Exactly. It's like, that's not going to be helpful, right? So don't strike out. Well, what do I have to do to not strike out? Swing a good pitches. Okay, I'm going to go up there, swing a good pitches, right? Or see the ball, whatever it is, right? What's your thing you want to do, maybe to prevent the thing you don't want to happen or to, So, but and unfortunately, even as parents, as coaches, sometimes how we give coaching is flawed because we say what we don't want them to do. Right? Hey, don't put your, don't do this, don't do that. Well, what should they do instead? So even framing as a coach or as a parent, what's the replacement behavior? What's the behavior you want to see? Keep your elbow up. Okay, that's better. For then, don't drop your elbow. Whatever's technically relevant to whatever you're coaching.
Yeah, it's a good point. This is incredible because, the ones that are getting the book and are reading the book and are going to read the book that are listening to this podcast, you're able to explain it and they're able to hear it from you instead of just reading it and maybe interpreting it in a way.
Yeah.
But hearing you explain it is invaluable. It's awesome. So we get into the R, which is a realistic.
Yeah.
And then of course it's time bound, and how crucial is a realistic goal and setting a time limit on that to the confidence and building upon those short-term goals that we're able to meet.
Yeah, I think the time, again, our brain is lazy, and as humans, we're naturally inclined towards procrastination. It's just a default mode. That's not a character flaw in anyone, right? It's just a natural brain function. We conserve energy, or we try to avoid things that are unpleasant. So the time bound gives you that deadline, right? It gives you that push, that little motivational jolt to get you moving, get you to do the work. I like to think about it. Most of us use GPS this day and age while we're driving. So for the adults in the room, kids, if you're driving already, great. But if you think about when you set your Waze or Google Maps or whatever, Apple Maps, it always gives you an ETA, right? Of how close you are. Hopefully, if you all listening to the podcast, anyone race it, try to beat the ETA. Just me? I don't know.
Yeah, we all do.
We do, right? It's like, oh no, that's assuming, there's all reasons, but there's that idea of when there's a deadline, your brain is more inclined to push and to keep going and do the extra work. And again, using that similar car ride analogy, anyone who's ever taken a long road trip, when you know you've only got like 30 minutes left or 45 minutes left on that ride, but you kind of have to go to the bathroom, you're like, when it's close enough, you're like, I'll push through the discomfort. I'll keep going, knowing that I get to be home sooner. And so thinking about that from a goals perspective, the reason why a timeline is so important is that you're kind of turning on that little competitive edge with yourself and saying like, all right, I can beat that timeline, or I can get it done, or I'm willing to push through this hard work, this discomfort of doing hard things, because I know that at the end of this, when this date happens, I'm going to be so much better for it. Or I'm going to have that goal that I want, that I need, care about. So the deadlines are really, quite frankly, just a motivational hack.
That's true. And I was thinking about this, and I go through this. It's if you wake up before your alarm clock gets up, and I'm talking like an hour or so, you wake up and your body just naturally wakes up. It's so much easier for you to kind of get up, start your day. Everything is good to go. But if you wait and let that alarm clock get you up out of bed an hour later, it's like all you want to do is lay in that bed. That's all you want to do.
Yeah.
I go through it almost every day. If I can go ahead and get myself up before my alarm clock, it's a great morning. But if I have to rely on that alarm clock to get me up, it's like the last thing I want to do is actually get up out of my bed. And it's like that time hack.
Yeah. Well, and there's typically, if you're having to, if the alarm clock, there's other reasons. You were probably exhausted and needed to sleep, all that kind of stuff. But
I'm with you on that. And before we get out of here, I did want to jump on the mental toughness myths. I thought that was just a great piece in the book, and it's almost like it answers questions that people didn't know they had. And it's like we have these assumptions of what mental toughness is, and what mental toughness isn't. Can you kind of go into a little bit without giving too much away that's in the book, so people to jump in and read the book? I mean, there's some good ones in here. I think that we all think this is what mental toughness is, but truly it's not.
Yeah. I think I'll just talk about the biggest assumption that people have, or that gets in their way of being more mentally tough, is assuming that it's an end state, that it's like it's a destination. Mental toughness is a destination. And it's really not. It's something that is always changing and adapting and flexing to your new circumstances, to your new skill set. And so it's a constant something that needs to be worked on, and very, very similar to physical fitness. Is that it's not something that you just get to work out once and you're like, yeah, I'm fit. I wish it'd be really great. All of my working out that I did in my college years would have had me set for life. Unfortunately, my waistline and my pants are telling me otherwise right now. But but so I think that's the biggest thing that for people to remember is that mental toughness is not a destination. It's not something that I get there and I'm like, yes, I'm here. There's no more work I have to do. It's a constant it's going to ebb and flow, much like your physical fitness. You go through times where you're less fit, you go through times where you're more fit, and so the goal is that if you have some key indicators for yourself of, your confidence, how well you're able to maintain your confidence, your calm, your clutchness, if any of those start to go down the drain a little bit. I know, for instance, in the one of the free gifts I offer in the book is the ability to take the athletic coping skills inventory. So it's a really just nice quick snapshot of your current level of mental toughness, right? It's like a fitness test. You just take it and you're kind of, where am I at right now? But based on that information, you can maybe prioritize what areas of mental toughness you need to focus on. So if you scored low on the confidence section, like, okay, well, let me put some energy and effort into that. I can direct my SMART goals in that direction for the next month, 2 months, and then I'll take it again and see how it goes. There's also just perceptions of, okay, it's getting better, I can work on something else now. But recognizing that mental toughness it's like physical fitness. It's constant. It's something you always got to work on. And right when you think you have it figured out, there's always some new challenge in life or things get harder.
Way it goes.
Yeah. And this is important for us. I'm constantly having to learn this, even, in my late whatever's I'm 39. So,
we're getting there.
They're getting there. Us 2000. That's right. We both graduated in 2002.
That's right.
But just helping this book, hopefully it's obviously it's for parents too, but for teens, I think the biggest message I want to send them is that this is not something that you ever have to completely figure out. This is not something that you're going to like have a magic pill and be like, oh yeah, okay. Like, it just gets you better at doing hard things. It gets you better at handling hard things. It gets you better at bringing more joy and remembering that you can't and will never be perfect. And so accepting that and acknowledging that and just kind of enjoying the process of figuring life out. Not that every moment is going to be pleasant. I tell a story in the book. One of my biggest moments in my junior year is I was playing for a coach that decided to bring back college players in the middle of the summer. And basically they played my position, and I was now not playing in this critical junior year before your senior year. Like, I couldn't have predicted that. I thought I was having a great season. I was doing things well. And that was a blow. That sucked. It was not pleasant. But I can tell you now, looking back, the benefits of hindsight, that was probably one of the most beneficial things that could have ever happened to me, because I had to push through. I had to recognize that. And I'm not going to lie, I had a little pity party. I was not mentally tough for a good chunk of 3 or 4 weeks. Like, I had my moment that was not effective, but thankfully I had a wonderful parent that kind of was seeing that slide and being like, nah. And so I talk about the reminder my dad gave me in the book, but getting back to being myself and understanding that, hey, I couldn't control this. This isn't something I could deal with. So let's get back to just being me, focusing on what I can control and doing the best I can given the situation. And I think if kids can recognize that and not acknowledge that mental toughness does not mean you won't experience hard things.
Yeah.
Hard things, unfortunately, are part of life. They're always going to be a part of life, no matter how old you are, how rich you are, how poor you are, how many friends you have, how few friends you have. It's just, that's unfortunately a condition of living. So if I can help kids recognize that, that's part of my mission. I want to, there's too many kids taking their lives right now. And that just, it's gutting and it sucks. And I want kids to recognize that you have the tools, and it's okay that it sucks right now, but it can and will be better.
I was in the Marine Corps from 2002 to 2012, and there was a couple of the guys that in units, not necessarily in my company, but in my battalion, in my company, and didn't have it effective in the battalion. There was suicide. I'm a big believer in the Till Valhalla project and Mission 22, what they are doing, trying to bring awareness to it. I think the same thing needs to be done to our student athletes, not just at the collegiate level, but amateur level all the way down to starting out. I mean, we
Yeah.
don't know what they're dealing with. And just giving them some tools that they can kind of go to work with is like a box, and they don't know what to do with these tools. They don't even know they have these tools.
Yeah.
But luckily, there are people out there like you that is not only spreading the word about, mental training and, just mental preparedness, that it's okay to feel the way that you feel.
Yeah.
But we can get, on the other side of it and kind of help you process, because we're not going to be able to stop these negative thoughts. They go into everyone's mind. I mean, we're all human. And then just, I can't thank you enough for joining me today. And
it's been my pleasure. This is so much fun.
to talk about the book. I mean, I'm so excited for it. Where can we find the book right now? So I know the audience is definitely going to want to, if they haven't ordered it yet, they're definitely going to want to order it after hearing you talk about the book. Where can we find it?
So ultimately it will be on Amazon. And so there'll be a Kindle version, a paper copy, and a hard copy. So you can choose your poison, pick your poison, I guess, whichever format you like best. The eventual goal is to make an Audible or, audio book. That's down the line.
You've
so
got
Amazon.
to narrate it. You've got to do it yourself.
Okay. It's good to know. I will work on that.
Got to.
But for now, so that's going to be published on March 17th. So I'm not quite sure when we're airing this, but so if it's prior to March 17th, you can go ahead and go to valstoncoaching.com/free book. And I'll send you the link so you can post it with this. And you can download a copy. And as long as you're willing to give me a good review, well, you can download a copy.
That's how I got mine, folks.
Yeah.
That's how I got mine.
So I'm trying to spread the wealth, and I really I want to get this book into the hands of the people who need it the most. So up until March 17th, you can get a free copy and check it out. And then after that, you can get it on Amazon.
Yeah, I'm going to have your socials and your website linked down below, both on the audio side, which will go out to Apple and iTunes and Google and Spotify and you name it, it's going.
That's awesome.
And on the YouTube side, it'll definitely be linked down below, and they'll be able to get to you just by clicking a link, and they'll be able to find you. I reached out to you not too long ago, a couple of days ago, I think, almost. And we connected right away. So you're not hard to reach. So, what's in it for the future now for you? What are we doing? What are you doing moving forward? What projects do you have now that the book is complete? It's being published.
So I've got a couple of things I'm working on. I've got several courses that people can buy that is more video instruction lessons. And so that's on my website on the program page. You have access. There's one specific for softball and baseball players. And then there's a couple that are generic to any sport. And so I'm really trying to build up, for instance, I call it the Mental Edge Maximizer program, which is either a 6-month or 12-month subscription plan. And you get, it's probably about 14 weeks worth of lessons that go through the different elements of building your self-awareness, building your confidence, your focus, your resilience, your ability to manage your nerves, your physiology, and then being able to put it all together. And so there's I don't remember individually how many lessons are each one, but the lessons are, somewhere between 10 to 20 minutes. And there's an activity that's at the bottom of each one. And that includes weekly coaching as well, some group coaching. So trying to get that program out there, get a good, solid community of teen athletes working together to, again, the community, the building your support team that I talk about in the book is helping teens not only learn from experts, but each other, and that these problems that you're facing aren't necessarily unique. I mean, there might be a few ones here and there that they're dealing with that are unique situations, but a lot of it is just common human experiences. And if they can see how other teens are dealing with these same issues in their sport and in their school, and as they grow and develop as humans. So I'm really excited to get that up and running. It currently exists, but definitely could get it out to more people.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited to get that group coaching and those programs out and available to the end user. So to y'all.
I'm going to push it as hard as I can push it until people are like, all right, stop pushing it. I mean, that's my role. That's what I'm supposed to do. I think it's my calling to get as much information as I can out to the people that may or may not need it. And then they can determine that. But a lot of this stuff is out there. People just don't know that's out there. I mean, they'll Google something and then they'll just read something with no context and they'll try to apply it. And it just doesn't work like that. So parents, educate yourself so you can help educate your young ones. Coaches do the same thing. I think that's the biggest disconnect we have right now. Coaches are doing a great job coaching the game, but man, we don't know how to coach people. We don't know how to invest in the person before the ball player. And I'm trying my hardest to kind of bridge that gap. And I'm going to use you as a conduit.
Oh, please. I am happy to help in any way, especially, coaches. If there, if there's enough demand, I will create you a program, coaches. I will. I mean, you can watch the lessons with the kids too. It's designed for anybody picking it up. But
I know what I'm going to be doing.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been fun.
All right, so that's going to do it for this episode. Big shout out to Valerie for joining me today. It was a lot of fun catching up with her and learning about her book, Confident, Calm, and Clutch. If you haven't had a chance yet, please, down in the description below, there's a link for you for a free digital copy of that book. It'll be released later on this month. You can get it on Amazon, and I'll make sure you have a link to that as well. But for now, get your free digital copy. Carry it with you on your phone. Tell your kids about it. Send it to your kids. Make sure they're reading it. And as well, if you share this with a friend, make sure you tell them you love them.